The last time you got somewhere unfamiliar, you did not navigate. You followed instructions. Turn left in 300 meters. Keep right. You have arrived. You put the phone in your pocket and walked through the door without ever holding the route in your mind. You did not need to. Something else held it for you. And if someone asked you right now to retrace that route without the phone, there is a reasonable chance you could not do it. Not because you are inattentive, because you never actually needed to know. Now pull that away. Pull the phone away, the map, the street sign, the name of the road, any written record of where anything is. You are standing somewhere vast and largely unmarked, and you need to get back. Not back to your car, back to the only shelter you have, across terrain that all looks roughly the same, and if you fail, there is no one coming. No signal, no backup, no second chance. That was not a nightmare scenario. That was Tuesday. For most of human history, for most humans who ever lived. And they solved it. They solved it so well and with so little that we would recognize as a tool that the solution became part of the biology of the brain itself. And understanding what they built reveals something uncomfortable about what happens when we stop using it. The problem of getting lost is older than our species. Every animal that moves through space has to solve it. But humans, uniquely, move through space at scales that almost nothing else could manage. They crossed deserts, navigated open ocean, tracked migration routes across tens of thousands of kilometers over multiple generations, and did all of this without a single written word to help them, often long before writing existed at all. The question of how they did it is not just a history question. It is a brain question, because the answer lives inside your skull right now, running on whatever use you give it. Buried deep in the brain, on both sides, is a small structure the size and rough shape of a seahorse. Its name in Greek means exactly that, seahorse, the hippocampus. For most of the 20th century, scientists understood it as a memory organ, the structure that converts short-term experience into long-term memory. A person with a damaged hippocampus can hold a conversation and then forget it completely within minutes. They live in a permanent present, with no thread connecting one moment to the next. But in 1971, a neuroscientist named John O'Keefe, working at University College London, discovered something in the hippocampi of rats that nobody had expected. He found neurons that fired not in response to sight or sound or smell, but in response to place. When the rat was in a specific location in its environment, a specific set of cells lit up. Move the rat to a different spot, and a different set fired. O'Keefe called them place cells. The hippocampus was not just a memory organ. It was a map. A living, constantly updating internal map of wherever the animal currently was. O'Keefe shared the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2014 for this discovery. The thing humans had been using to navigate for hundreds of thousands of years before they had any concept of a map was, it turned out, a map itself. It was always inside the brain. This is what the people navigating the African savannah were using. Not a written record. Not a landmark system in any simple sense. a continuously running internal model of space, updated in real time as they moved, storing not just where they had been, but how the different parts of the landscape connected to each other. Researchers call this a cognitive map. You have one. You use it every time you walk through your own home in the dark. You navigate the furniture without looking because your hippocampus is holding a model of the space and tracking your position within it. It is so automatic that it feels like nothing at all. The question of how well developed this system can become in a human being was answered with unexpected precision by looking at a profession that still demands exactly what our ancestors demanded. In 1995, a cognitive neuroscientist at University College London named Eleanor Maguire was watching a television film about London cab drivers preparing for an exam called The Knowledge. The exam requires candidates to memorize every one of the 25,000 streets within a 6-mile radius of central London, plus the most efficient routes between thousands of possible pairs of locations. Preparing for it takes most candidates 2 to 4 years of daily riding on a moped, learning the streets through physical repetition. Maguire looked at the screen and immediately understood that these were people putting extraordinary demands on exactly the system she studied. She wanted to see what that demand had done to their brains. In 2000, Maguire published the results. She had scanned the brains of 16 licensed London cab drivers and compared them with the brains of people who did not drive taxis. The posterior hippocampus of the cab drivers was measurably larger. Not slightly larger, significantly larger. And the size of the increase correlated directly with the number of years the driver had been on the job. The longer the career, the larger the posterior hippocampus. This was not a predisposition toward cab driving. Maguire confirmed this in a follow-up study in 2011 with Catherine Woollett, tracking candidates through the entire process of preparing for the knowledge. The candidates who passed the exam showed measurable hippocampal growth over the years of study. The candidates who failed, and the control group who were not training at all, showed none. The brain had physically changed because of what it had been asked to do. The ancient navigation organ, pushed hard, grew. Maguire compared it to a muscle. The detail that makes this most remarkable is hidden in one additional finding from her research. London's bus drivers have skills as demanding as taxi drivers in many respects. They navigate the city all day. They have precise spatial routines and a thorough knowledge of specific routes. But their hippocampi were not enlarged. Because bus drivers follow fixed routes, they do not build a living internal map of an entire city and find novel paths through it. They follow a predetermined track. The hippocampus only grows when you actually navigate. Other cultures pushed the same system in entirely different directions and arrived at answers just as extraordinary. Consider what the Polynesian navigators did between roughly 3,000 and 1,000 years ago. They crossed the entire Pacific Ocean, the largest body of water on Earth, in outrigger canoes, without instruments, without charts, without any device we would recognize as a navigation tool. They settle Hawaii, Easter Island, New Zealand, and hundreds of islands scattered across millions of square miles of open water. Finding a small island from 2,000 miles away on the open ocean is a problem of staggering difficulty. There are no roads, there are no landmarks. There is only water in every direction, and somewhere out there, a speck of land. They solved it by reading the ocean itself. Master navigators of the Caroline Islands, a tradition documented in detail by the anthropologist David Lewis in his 1972 book, We the Navigators, memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars across the full circle of the horizon, allowing them to hold their direction through the night. They read ocean swells, which travel in consistent directions from distant storms and maintain their pattern even when wind changes the surface chop. They read the color of the water, the types of clouds that form over land that is too far away to see, the behavior of birds. They held all of this simultaneously in a running mental model of where they were relative to where they were going. Not as a metaphor, as a literal cognitive map, maintained in the hippocampus across days and nights of open ocean. One navigator from the Marshall Islands, interviewed by Lewis in the early 1970s, described the experience of offshore navigation this way. The island does not move. You move past it. He was describing a mental frame in which the navigator remains stationary in his mind and the islands flow toward him as he moves. This is almost exactly the language that neuroscientists now use to describe how place cells work. The internal map holds the world still and tracks the navigator moving through it. The old man on the canoe and the rat in O'Keefe's laboratory were using the same mechanism. This brings us to what Aboriginal Australians were doing and have been doing for at least 40,000 years, possibly much longer. Think about Australia as a navigation problem. The continent covers almost 3 million square miles, much of it desert, much of it without surface water, without roads, without any of the landmarks most navigation systems depend on. And yet, the Aboriginal peoples of Australia travelled all of it. They traded goods across the entire continent. Ochre travelled thousands of kilometers. Songs and ceremonies moved from coast to coast. People navigated to specific sacred sites they had never personally visited, guided by descriptions that had been passed down through generations. The system they built for this is called, in the English term coined by the writer Bruce Chatwin in his 1987 book of the same name, the songlines. In Aboriginal languages, they have many names, and the concept carries spiritual weight that a word like navigation does not begin to capture. But at their functional core, songlines are this: routes across the landscape encoded not in symbols or maps, but in song. Each landmark along a route corresponds to a specific part of a song. The song describes the ancestor who walked that path in the dreaming, the deep creative time before time. To sing the song correctly, in order, is to walk the route. The melody is the map. The words are the waypoints. And because the songs could be sung in any language, a traveler crossing into a new group's territory could still navigate as long as they knew the melody. The tune transcended the words. Routes that were once songlines are now roads. The highway across the Nullarbor Plain, connecting the east and west coasts of Australia, follows a path that Aboriginal people had been traveling for tens of thousands of years. The route existed in song before it existed in asphalt. The songlines were not mythology dressed up as navigation. They were navigation dressed up as mythology, because that was how you made something survive without writing, without paper, without any external storage at all. You made it sacred. You made it a story. You made it something people would protect and pass on exactly, because changing it would mean losing the root. Now consider what happened when they did not have to remember anymore. In 2017, a team led by the neuroscientist Amir Homayoun Javadi at the University of Greenwich put people in a virtual simulation of a city and asked half of them to navigate to a destination themselves and the other half to follow GPS turn-by-turn directions through the same route. The hippocampus was active, and measurably so, in the group navigating independently. It showed increased activity every time the route required a decision. In the group following GPS instructions, the hippocampus showed no such increase. Following instructions did not use it in any meaningful way. The two people who made the same journey made it with completely different brains. A larger study published in Scientific Reports in 2020 went further. Researchers tracked 50 drivers over 3 years, measuring their lifetime GPS use and testing their hippocampal-dependent spatial memory. The finding was direct. Greater GPS use since the initial testing was associated with a steeper decline in spatial memory over the following years. The people who delegated navigation got measurably worse at navigating without it. This is not a case for throwing away the phone. GPS is useful, genuinely and obviously useful, in ways that nobody should dismiss. The concern is smaller and more specific. The hippocampus, like any organ that changes with use, also changes with disuse. The London cab driver who studies 25,000 streets grows a larger one. The driver who follows a fixed route does not. And the evidence suggests that the person who hands navigation entirely to a device is slowly and specifically reducing the thing the device replaced. The Aboriginal elder who memorized a continent's worth of routes through song was not working around a limitation. They were using the full capacity of the most sophisticated navigation system that has ever existed. The one that builds a living model of space, updates it continuously, and holds it intact across a human lifetime. The song lines are not impressive because they are ancient. They are impressive because of what they required the brain to do, and what the brain, pushed to do it, became. Now, the next time your phone tells you to turn left, notice the moment just before you look at it. There is a fraction of a second in which your hippocampus is doing something, running a quick check of where you are and where you might be going, building the beginning of a map you will never complete because the phone will do it for you. That fraction of a second is 40,000 years of navigational technology waiting to be used. Whether it gets used is, increasingly, your choice.